Hey everyone, before we get started with this video, I just wanted to really quickly take a moment to mention the community survey that's going around on Reddit, Discord, Facebook. This is basically a general survey intended to collect as much useful data as possible about different elements of your gameplay progress and interest. The intention is we'll be able to see some possible interesting trends and correlations that can only come from having a large amount of data or information from a lot of people. That's why we're asking some really specific and exact questions, because that'll give us a better ability to kind of compile different interesting charts and stuff. So we're going to be collecting this data until the end of the day on Wednesday, June 3rd, before the Ares and Maya banner launches. If you have a chance, definitely set aside 10 or 15 minutes and open up your Langrisser account and fill out as much of this as you can. There's nothing in the survey that can personally identify you. I'm not asking for your account number or your name or your email or anything like that. I'm also not sharing the raw data with anyone, including anyone at Zlong Games, so it's basically just going to be me looking at the data, and then I'll compile charts and analysis from there. So if you have a minute, I think it would be really cool and could give us some interesting results, so I'll leave a link to this in the description below, and on with Should You Summon. Hey everyone, it's Kong again with another episode of Should You Summon. As always, I'm going to be presenting high-level overviews using these 4 criteria to help you decide whether this banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers. How these characters fit into your team, whether they unlock any bonds, what kind of content they get used for, and their future availability. So let's hop right into this Destiny banner featuring Landius, Yulia, and Jugler, running from May 28th to June 10th. This is a Destiny banner, so your first SSR is guaranteed to be one of these 3 that you don't already have. After you pull your first SSR, then this reverts to a normal raid-up banner, where you simply have a higher % chance of summoning these 3 characters, but you can also pull off-banner characters as well. So let's start with Landius. He's one of the game's best overall tanks. He's particularly dominant in PvP, but he's great in PvE as well. If he's within range of an ally, his talent gives him a boost to attack and converts a chunk of his attack over to defense and magic defense. He takes reduced damage from range attacks, can counterattack at 2 range, has a passive skill that lets him self-revive after being killed, and has a helpful aura that makes affected allies take reduced range damage and have less of a chance of being on the receiving end of critical hits. His 3-cost skill ups the ante by also preventing nearby enemies from using move again effects. Maybe just because people have high expectations of him or try to lean on him really hard out of the gate, but he does kind of appear squishy at lower investment levels, so be prepared to schedule some Gate of Fate farming time for him. He's a member of Protagonists, buffed by Matthew, and Yeles Legends, buffed by Landius and Sigma. So yes, on top of that, he also carries a fusion power for one of the most powerful factions in the game. The unique effect from this faction buff grants an extra 15% damage dealt if you don't have class advantage over your enemy. For bonds, he unlocks the attack bonds for Lanford, Listel, the Knight of Mystery, and Rachel. For his own bonds, he needs Rachel for his attack bond, and this is an important one for him because his attack affects his tankiness as well as his attack power. Now, as far as content goes, in PvE, he's on faction for Phoenix in Eternal Temple, and he's a strong pick for Hugin and Munin in Ancient Beckoning. He's also on faction for Nidhogg, but you don't really want to take him to that battle if you don't have to. The fact that he can tank against ranged units makes him a very helpful unit to bring with you for almost any general PvE content as well. On the PvP side, he's a dominant unit to the extent that he's still probably the most common first ban in Apex Arena. He's one of 2 tanks that has essentially shaped the PvP meta at the top levels. I won't spoil who the other one is yet. The fact that he can self-revive once after dying makes him a really pesky nuisance to actually get rid of, and the fact that he can counterattack at range also reduces the number of units who can effectively threaten him. On top of that, his aura that reduces incoming damage for the rest of your team is really handy in PvP. So for availability, Landius should be back as early as mid-July on a raid-up Valentine's trade-in event banner alongside Angelina. Then this same banner with Yulia and Jugler is coming back in mid-October. So next let's look at Yulia. She's a strong overall general-purpose unit. If her health % is high enough, then her talent gives her boosted damage, up to 3 self-revives, and self-healing after combat. She also seems to be a big favorite of Zlong Games for getting different skins, so if you're really into kind of paying for skins to customize the look of your character, then Yulia has a wealth of options there. She's a member of Legion of Glory, buffed by Ledin, Elwyn, and Grenier, Princess Alliance, buffed by Luna and Shelfaniel, and Mythical Realm, buffed by Gizaroth and Tree Sage. For bonds, she actually doesn't unlock any other character's bonds. For her own bonds, she does need the common rare Jessica for her defensive bond, and Zerida for her attack bond. So for content, in PvE she's quite a helpful unit for the fights against Scylla in Eternal Temple and Nidhogg in Ancient Beckoning. She's also fairly strong against the Fire Dragon and in her infantry class, the Thunder Dragon. Her incidental healing, along with whatever's provided by her best weapon, the Gift of Eternal Life, as well as her self-revives, make her strong unit for general-purpose PvE as well. In PvP, she's starting to fall off a bit, largely due to the fact that her factions aren't among the strongest, and partly due to Meta Darling Deedlet's release, making less space for her in most boxes. She's still quite a solid unit in certain matchups, and she brings a mix of melee and ranged magical attacks, the ability to strip 5 buffs with Holy Justice, and strong soldiers in Unicorns. For availability, Yulia is slated to return in early September on a raid-up, so non-Destiny banner alongside the upcoming new character Maya. Then, as I mentioned before, this same Destiny banner with Landius and Jugler is coming back in mid-October. And finally, let's talk about the sacred beast, Jugler. And that didn't take long. Here's the other meta-defining PvP tank. Jugler is a bulky good boy whose talent heals the rest of the team whenever he takes damage. He has 2 separate guard skills focused on physical and magical protection, each of which provides some additional bonus effects. He also has some strong offensive options, such as the single target Beast Shock and the AoE Master of Ice. His 3-cost skill teleports him into the midst of his enemies and activates some elements of almost all of his marquee abilities. Finally, his unique equipment, Jugler's Gift, which is presumably a helmet because he carries it around in his mouth, is universally understood to be one of the most essential acquisitions from the Secret Realm store. It heals him after battle, but it also lets him equip 3 skills regardless of their skill slot cost. Judging from the number of skills he has, you'd be correct in assuming that he wants to eat a lot of your runestones. He's a member of Meteor Strike, buffed by Zerida, Origins of Light, buffed by Dehart, Jugler, and Freya, and Mythical Realm, buffed by Gizaroth and Tree Sage. So he does bring his own faction buff, although he rarely wants to bring it just to buff himself up. His precious skill slots are better used on other skills. That said, his fusion power does grant an additional 15% damage dealt when you have a higher HP percent than your enemy. For bonds, he unlocks the defensive bond for Sophia and the attack bond for Pierre, so at least he's not gating any SSR characters. For his own bonds, he needs SR characters Sophia and Liphany, so again, fairly easy to unlock. Now for content, in PvE he's on faction for the Fenrir and Jormungandr fights in Ancient Beckoning, and he's a highly recommended character for both of them. He's on faction for Scylla and Valkyrie in Eternal Temple as well, but he's not necessarily the best choice for those ones. Now in PvP, along with Landius, Jugler is one of the 2 premier PvP tanks. You'll often want to run him against AoE teams to take advantage of the team healing in his talent. You'll also end up using him a lot after your Landius gets first banned. As such, a significant portion of the Apex meta revolves around finding ways to kill or disable Jugler, whether it's through heal reversal, tank busters, or whatever. His 3C teleport also helps him fit in with more mobility-oriented teams. For availability, the next time Jugler's slated to return is when this same banner comes back in mid-October. So just to wrap up, we have Landius, who's a dominant distant counter PvP tank who's also great in PvE. He's a Yales Legends faction buffer, and he unlocks attack bonds for Lanford, Listel, the Knight of Mystery, and Rachel. Then we have Yulia, who's a strong general-purpose PvP and PvE unit. She has self-revives and incidental healing that make her quite self-reliant. And finally we have Jugler, who's a dominant team-healing PvP tank who's also great in PvE. He's an Origins of Light faction buffer, and he unlocks bonds for Sophia and Pierre. In case it's not already obvious, I highly recommend summoning on this banner if you're missing either of the tanks. They're both essential PvP units with amazing crossover utility into PvE. With enough investment, you can lean hard on either of them. Yulia is a strong unit in her own right, so there's not really an obvious dud summon here. And finally, just a note about upcoming banners. Next week marks the launch of the highly anticipated new unit Ares from Langrisser Reincarnation Tensei, as well as his bannermate and attack bond unlocker Maya. Ares is a ridiculously powerful and mobile bomb who can fly through enemy units, and was a top-shelf unit throughout the Chinese Apex Season 4, so I expect we'll be seeing a lot of him in PvP in the near future. Since these two banners overlap, you do have the option of waiting a week and seeing if you can snag a copy of Ares before summoning on this one. That said, if you're missing either of these tanks, they're arguably a more important puzzle piece for your PvP box than even Ares would be. So fortunately you do have that overlap to decide how you want to prioritize spending your tickets. When this Landius, Yulia, and Jugler banner goes away, it should be replaced by a Raid Up banner featuring Betty and Shelfaniel, which should be a welcome break after the recent spate of must-pull banners. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. Let me know who you're hoping to get and what kind of luck you had in the comments. Jugler is my guaranteed pull on this one, so I probably won't summon until the Ares banner comes out, just so I can do a double barrel summoning session in one video. But on the other hand, I don't know if I can wait a full week to get my guaranteed doggo. We'll see. Anyway, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Should You Summon.